Hey everybody, JT's Reborn here, and welcome back to another edition of After the Movie. The last video after the movie I recorded, was for the original Evil Dead. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the sequel, which is Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Okay, so Evil Dead 2, this is where the series became like my favorite horror series. Like this and Army of Darkness. First movie, you know, it's a good movie. I wouldn't consider it a great movie, but I do really like it. But like the second movie, that's where Evil Dead, like, you know, they really put their staple on the genre and make it one of the most ridiculously entertaining movies of all time. Like, this is where the series, first movie was more straight up horror. This is where the series goes into goofy campiness, and that's where it really shines. So, the plot of this movie is basically Ash goes back to the cabin in a way, although, like, the continuity of it, like, it's just Ash and Linda this time, his sister and all that aren't mentioned at all. And what Sam Raimi's explanation, I guess, is, like, he remakes, like, the first, like, the point where Ash, at the end of the first movie, is where he's, like, turns around and screams. That's where, like, the second movie is supposed to kind of pick up, in a sense. But, like, they basically remake the beginning of the first movie, and then it goes into, like, goofy territory. Now, Bruce Campbell, he's not quite the one-line spewing machine that we know Ash in, like, Army of Darkness, giving the performance of a lifetime. This is where he's, like, he kind of comes in, him and his girlfriend Linda, they go to this cabin, they find the Book of the Dead, you know, and unleash the power of the Deadites. And it's extremely funny. Evil Dead 2 is a hilarious movie. It's gory as hell, but like some of the creative camera work that Sam Raimi does, you know, you'll see the camera kind of like moving through, like almost like it's driving. Ash has to cut off his girlfriend's head with a chainsaw, and she comes back, she's like, "Hello, lover." And so that's pretty funny. At one point, Ash's hand becomes possessed, and he has to saw it off with a chainsaw. And then basically that's where you know, you see Ash come together with like the good old-fashioned chainsaw arm. And I think it's really awesome. And then like you have some other characters come in, like family of like, you know, the person who initially opened the book. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but then they come into the fold, and then more Deadites come possessing. There's some really funny stuff, like the hand being an asshole to him is great. Like his hand flipping off, he's like, "Gotcha, didn't I, you little sucker?" And then one of the parts that makes me laugh, dude, is his hands flipping him off at the same time. And then all of a sudden, like, Ash is starting to go crazy. Like, the cabin, all these other, like, things are, you know, really fucking with him. The cabin starts laughing. There's a funny part where all of a sudden it goes, I'll cut in some clips here and there, but you can just kind of see like how the cabin is and such, and it's really funny. But then all of a sudden after that, that's when everyone else starts to come into play. More Deadites coming in, more people getting cut up. Ash is really starting to come into his own here. He's not, you know, that weird, scared like little guy from like the first movie. He's really like starting to become really badass. There's some hillbillies in there, and then like one of them like gets cut up pretty bad. Ash actually kind of turns evil into like a Deadite for a little bit, which is pretty cool. And then Ash, you know, he eventually overcomes it. And then Ash goes ahead. Ash and the one girl are together, and then all of a sudden, you know, the mom comes out of the cellar, known as her name is Henrietta. She's like this other Deadite too, and she's just like this really huge, fat, old lady. And she's like, "I'll swallow your soul, I'll swallow your soul." And so she takes like she has like the pages of the Book of the Dead that they need to send the evil back are in the cellar. So Ash has to go down and fight her. So he gets his shotgun, he saws it off, and then, you know, he puts like his chainsaw arm together. This is the first time that he ever does this, and it's a great scene. Here, I'll play a clip real quick. Wasn't that just amazing? Groovy. Like, I mean, that's where it gets, like, it's so hokey, but it's great. And then Ash goes down to the cellar, kind of gets his ass kicked. Henrietta comes up, and she's like this, like, really big, like, fat, Deadite type, you know, creature, and it's ridiculously crazy. And, you know, Henrietta is just this huge. And then, like, all of a sudden, like, Ash comes out of the cellar, that's where he starts to get really badass. And he's like, "Hey, let's go." This is what I love about this series. It's Ash. Ash is what sells this series. I mean, there's some great comedy, and there's some gore. Like, there's a lot of gore, and it's just such a fun movie. And then he fights Henrietta with his chainsaw arm, and her head turns into like a claymation thing. I love claymation and all that, you know, good old fashioned stuff. I thought that stuff was like, you know, pretty cool with the claymation and all that. And then afterwards, Henrietta gets her head chopped off, and then she's like, I'll swallow your soul, I'll swallow your soul. And then he puts his foot down, and he's like, swallow this. Boom, blows her head right off. And then she summons, then, end of the movie is, they summon a portal to like send the evil back, but Ash ends up getting sucked back into time, and then he ends up in the Middle Ages, and that's what leads us into the third movie. Although the third movie, they kind of remake the ending of Evil Dead 2, although it's a little more fluent than in this one. So, the end of the movie, he's hailed. Like, it's weird, because the end of Evil Dead 2, Ash is, like, hailed as kind of a hero, because in the Book of the Dead, they prophesize a hero who is Ash. You know, he's the one with the chainsaw arm, and he's the Hefe, he's the chosen one. He's the promised one. He's the one who's going to, like, lead them against the Deadites. And then that's where we go into my favorite of the trilogy, which is Army of Darkness, the one I've seen. Holy shit, how many times have I watched Army of Darkness? Like, I've seen Evil Dead 2 a bit, you know, quite a bit. But Army of Darkness is the one where I've watched a ridiculous amount of times. I've seen it so much. Like, Army of Darkness is the one I keep going back to, and then Evil Dead 2 is my second favorite in this series. But Evil Dead 2 is great. It's hilarious. It's gory as hell. But it's like a fun gore. It's not like a really like, you're never going to gag with it. You're just going to kind of laugh with it. And then just some of this, you know, camera work and stuff in the movie, it's great. And then Ash, like, at the end of the movie, is like, no, no, no. Like, Ash isn't really a full-blown, like, dumbass, I'd say, like he is in Army of Darkness. He's kind of got, like, that, you know, like, first movie Ash and third movie Ash kind of, like, a little bit mixed in. He's got a little bit of goofiness to him with some of the one-liners, but he's more straightforward. So third movie where he really becomes, like, the greatest character, like, of all time in a horror movie, like, horror series. Like, Ash becomes, like, he rises above all, and he becomes the best, because Ash is awesome. And so is this movie. Sam Raimi came back to direct it, Bruce Campbell's in it, and I just love this movie. I love Evil Dead 2. It's so good. It's, wow. I mean, Evil Dead 2 is one of my favorites, so... Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this particular video. Be sure to come back next time as I, you know, go into Army of Darkness, and then I'll talk about the remake, and then I'll eventually get to, you know, episodes of the TV show. That's kind of my planned intention. By the time Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 3 ends, I'll hopefully have finished, you know, doing video reviews on every episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead. The good news about Ash vs. Evil Dead is the episodes are rather short, so they only run about, like, the first episode is like 40 minutes, then it's 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes after that, and so on and so forth. And it's great. So, yep. That's all I got to say about this one. Check out Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, and you'll have a great time with it. Anyways, that's all I got to say. Comment, like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.